In this episode, I get to speak with Victor Lee. He is the assisting managing editor at the ABA Journal for American Bar Association. I have been a big fan of his work for many years. We spoke about all things editing and how bias can be difficult to navigate in the current narratives of today's legal trends. Listen in for more. Before we get into this episode, we would like to thank our Season 4 sponsor, Affirm Investigative Solutions, your go-to litigation support company. Without them, we would not be able to keep upgrading and integrating new concepts to this growing podcast. If you would like to take your support further, feel free to hit the support button on our Let's Talk Paralegal website so we can continue providing quality and empowering content for you and all our listeners. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Let's Talk Paralegal podcast. I'm your host, Etta, and I'm with Victor Lee, I want to call you the guru of editing for ABA.
I don't know about that, but I appreciate that though.
I've been a long-term fan of yours. And I'm going to tell you this on record. You have been one of my, as podcasters, we've always want that one guest on our podcast, and we know we've made it. And so you were always my that one guest for me. So I appreciate your time. I appreciate you saying yes to my invitation. And I am, as if you haven't noticed already, I'm super excited that you're on here. But I want to start with pretty much introducing you for those of you that don't know, which if you don't, you're living under a rock, but don't know who Victor Lee is. Let's talk about Victor Lee.
Sure. Like you said, and thanks again for having me on your show. I really appreciate it. We're looking forward to having a good conversation. Yeah, this 5-year-old at home, brings home a lot of things.
I got you. I got a 7 and a 5 my own, so I got you.
I'm assistant managing editor at the ABA Journal. I've been there for about 10 years. Actually 10 years back in December. So I cover thank you. Yeah, I cover the business of law and focusing on technology specifically, but it incorporates a lot of things like law firm moves, law firm culture, marketing, legal education, and things like that. So it's a pretty big umbrella. A lot of different subjects fit under business of law, and it's basically what we kind of like look at it as sort of our section to kind of tell people what's important if they want to know how to run their practice or how to run things more efficiently. And we also look a lot like access to justice and how technology is kind of helping to bridge that gap and some of the controversies regarding, some people don't like that. Some people think that the technology might not be as reliable as having a lawyer, but some people think that it could help with the practice of law. So we look at it from all sorts of different angles.
Yeah, that's what I love. It's pretty much just informational, right? Like there's not like a one-sided, and I love that and I enjoy that and I appreciate that. It's very welcoming, right? Especially for us that are continuing to grow our skills and our education and what's really going on in legal trends throughout the legal industry. So how did you get into editing and this realm? Like how, what really I guess ignited that?
Well, I've always liked writing. I've always, just even as a kid, I always enjoyed just writing anything like creatively or working for, various school papers or for, doing just my own writing and whatnot. Even sometimes even just writing, papers for school. I mean, it wasn't the preferred way of doing things, but it is for me. I actually prefer doing that as opposed to like taking multiple choice tests or whatnot, which is why then I became a lawyer, before you had to like take a huge multiple choice test in order to get licensed. But
I never understood that, by the way.
it's yeah, I have opinions on that, but no, but yeah, like I've always enjoyed writing. I've always enjoyed that aspect of it, and but I've also really I've always liked reading about the law. I've always loved studying it. I've always loved writing about it. But then so for the longest time, I felt, okay, well, I should be a lawyer. I should just merge those interests and just go be a lawyer. And what I found, unfortunately, was I didn't like practicing law. It wasn't really for me. And the problem is that sort of like once you kind of figure out that what you wanted to do wasn't really what you want to do, then it's kind of like, well, then what do you do about it? Do you just stick with it and just hope it gets better? Or do you try to do something new? And luckily, I was still young enough. It was still early enough in my career. I didn't have a family yet I had to support or anything like that. So I decided, you know what? I've always liked writing. I've always liked journalism, and so I felt some of the skills that, so I was when I practiced law, I was a prosecutor in New York City,
Mm,
and so I felt like a lot of the skills that I had I had gained, or from just practicing law and being a prosecutor, would be transferable to being a journalist, because you still have to figure out what your story is. You still have to interview people and try to find out what happened. And you still have to put
right.
it, and then you have to put it together in like a story form, so that you can talk. Rather than being in front of a jury, then you have to like put it for readers and whatnot. So I felt the skills were transferable enough that I could do that. And luckily, it's been pretty
It
pretty good so
worked.
far. Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah.
I love it because, as I'm not, I don't consider myself a writer at all. But when the opportunity, presented itself and they said, "Hey, I want you to co-author on this book," and it was basically just a whole bunch of stories of paralegals and
Yeah.
providing like an inside view and this and that. So I was like, "Oh, I mean, I can write about my career and, the ups and downs and everything. That's pretty easy. I don't have to really investigate." So, I mean, I can totally relate, but then it's like, okay, well, I can't just write like I talk because not everybody's going to understand that, right? So it's a whole different mindset shift, right? Where you have to kind of have that skill. And it's like, okay, well, let me put my paralegal hat on. Let me pretend I'm talking to a client, right? And be
Hmm.
like, okay, be the filter from the lawyer to the client. That's basically what paralegals do in a nutshell anyway.
Yeah.
And so I really had to change that, right? Because sometimes you're not able to write like you talk, and even with memoirs and biographies and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So, in order for it to get your message across and for everyone to understand what you're trying to actually say, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, just it's not the same. I love that. So give us a little inside scoop, like a behind the scenes of kind of how this process works and how you make your magic, and just give us that. I mean, I have to say it's magic. I love it. I truly do enjoy your work.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, honestly, it's just like very often. I mean, especially with luckily, right now in legal tech. Sorry, right now in legal tech, it is a very interesting time right now with
Yes.
GPT coming in and just really disrupting the industry, and everything like that. So luckily, these last couple of these last like this last year or so, the stories have kind of written themselves, not to the point that we're putting them in GPT, but I feel like
Let's not do that. Let's not do
yeah,
that.
yeah. But we but just kind of like looking at just how it's changing the industry, what people are doing with it, why, I mean, obviously it hasn't, it's still in its infancy, and it's still a technology that needs to be kind of audited and vetted and really kind of like tested before,
Yeah.
but
Just like
but
anything else, right? That has come out
yeah,
throughout the years.
yeah, but just to see it kind of like establish the foothold that it has in the industry already, in the legal industry already, is pretty stunning. Just because, I mean, I don't know what your experience is with lawyers, but they don't tend to be the most technologically savvy.
No.
Um, you know, but and understandably so, right?
Yeah.
Because nobody wants to be that lawyer that gets sanctioned by the judge, for doing like what those lawyers did when they made up those
Oh my God.
citations. Yeah,
You
like
copy
when
and
they made,
pasted it. Oh my
yeah,
goodness. I can't.
yeah, like nobody wants to be that lawyer, or nobody wants to be the lawyer that gets written up by us, or by above the law, or by some of those organizations. So I understand that, and I understand why historically it hasn't been an easy sell, and especially this idea of like, look, I was in that same situation where like, I was in law school. I paid a lot of, I spent a lot of money for my education, spent a lot of time to kind of, to get licensed and everything like that. And so this idea that like the software could like do parts of my job, is not something that I really wanted to consider. And plus, and even now as a writer, this idea that like, chat GPT could potentially write something that, and take jobs away from us,
Right.
that's not the most comforting thought either. So
Right.
uh so I mean, so just kind of looking at sort of like all the different angles of that that's one way we've been able to generate stories. And just kind of, the industry always has things that we can cover. I mean, just
Yeah.
like, law firm mergers, law firm dissolutions, how and technology isn't always like the tent pole that we use, but you know it is a helpful tool for us, because we can talk about, well, you know this is how lawyers are dealing with this technological change, or this new social media platform, or this cybersecurity issue, or this cloud, move to the cloud, or virtual, or virtual practices, or hybrid practices, or whatnot. So I mean, these last few years have definitely been, sort of like for us, like there have been a lot of things, a lot of change, a lot of things to cover, and a lot of things that have happened in such a short amount of time that I haven't really seen in the industry, at least in that concentrated amount of time. I mean, maybe during the Great Recession, we saw some of we saw a lot of changes, just with regards to, but a lot of that sort of was more just sort of like how, maybe how law firms were structured, maybe how they ran their businesses, or maybe how they ran their practices. And technology wasn't as much of a driving point for that. That was more just financial. So kind of watching it sort of unfold, just these last few years has been very fascinating for us.
Yeah, no, I'm sure that COVID, right? COVID
Yeah,
too, the
yeah,
shift in the mindset as well, right? Because
yeah,
prior to COVID, we say this on the podcast all the time. Prior to COVID, it was very like, no, we can't breach confidentiality and disclaimers, and how about we get cyber breached or
yeah,
whatever it is, and no technology, no anywhere. And I remember when courthouses didn't even have the right outlets. We would have to bring adapters to actually, connect our technology. I get it.
yeah,
I've been there. I would go with my lawyers to trials and jury trials and all that stuff all the time. So I understand truly the struggle that they would go through when it came time for trial. But unfortunately, I don't, unfortunately and fortunately, I guess, right? There's always room for progress.
yeah,
And I always feel like we're always scared of the unknown, of what's going to happen. We love to assume, even though that's like the number one thing that we're not supposed to do in law, right? We're never supposed to assume. We're always
right,
supposed to investigate and
right,
and unveil, right?
right,
But unfortunately, we're human, right? We're always going to have those fears and those apprehensions, and it's just the lay of the land, right? And no matter how much education, how much we read, how much we, knowledge we digest, we're still going to have those, right? We're still going to
sure,
have those biases, and we're still going to be like that. But talking about bias, how do you guys, because that is one thing that I love about the ABA Journal and everything that you guys do at the Legal Talk Network and everything, you're really not, right? I mean, you guys are there's no bias there. You basically just, you're like what the news should be like. And no offense to people that watch the news. I haven't watched the news since I don't even know when, since before my kids. But I just don't, right? Because I feel like your opinion is not necessary. You're just there to report the facts. And I feel like that's what you guys do there at the network and at the ABA Journal and everything that you guys are involved in. I feel like there is really no bias there. And if anybody finds the bias, or anybody, I've seen the comments on the post and everything, I
yeah,
get it.
yeah,
But I feel like it's just how they interpret it, right? Because it's always open to interpretation, but it's mostly the interpretation that causes the chaos, is really
yeah,
what I call it. So how does that work, right? Because obviously you guys are human. It's not
right,
ChatGPT writing these articles and producing this content. So, tell me a little bit about how that goes, because that's something important for all of us, especially when we're working on the caseloads and we're
right,
working with clients that maybe we don't agree with what they did, or anything
yeah,
like that, or maybe it directly affected us because it was very similar to something that happened to us in our personal life. I mean,
mhm.
again, we're humans. So how do we maybe not eliminate, because we can't just become robots all of a sudden, but how do we separate it is really.
Yeah, and I appreciate you bring that up. I mean, obviously, yeah, like some people, will still take issue with that, obviously. But
Of
no,
course.
one thing that we found is that, like, you know, there are obviously, there is the issue of some people don't even like the fact that we bring up certain issues, right? Like
Uh,
if like, so for instance, using technology to bridge the access to justice gap is a very controversial topic. Just
Taboo.
with, yeah, especially within the legal industry, but also just at the ABA, and also just at bar associations and bar organizations all around the country.
Mhm.
And there are some people who think that just by virtue of the fact that we cover it, and that we let people know about these technologies that are, out there that could potentially, help pro se litigants and whatnot, that in itself is a bias, because we're giving them information that they wouldn't have otherwise, and they could potentially, get taken advantage of or whatnot. But we look at it sort of, okay, well, this stuff is still out there, right? And
Mhm.
you know, if we don't tell them about it, someone else is going to. And just by bringing up something doesn't isn't necessarily mean that we're endorsing it. It's, we still have to take a critical eye and look at these things, and we still have to, as best as we can, uh, present all the sides of the issue, rather than just being like, okay, this thing is the bee's knees. We have to. Everybody should use LegalZoom, or everyone should use, this or that. And it's just, I think, yeah, just as journalists, and just and this is where it kind of differs from being a lawyer, right? Because as a
Mhm.
lawyer, you don't care about that. You're just, you're there to represent your client, and you're there to do what you can to help them. And if that means, not looking at the other side, then so be it. I mean, you still have to evaluate it to, look at the strength of your case, but you don't have to present it to the jury, or I mean, you wouldn't be doing that. But
Right.
um, so our task is sort of like, to kind of, look at things from points of view, without, endorsing one or the other, and as best as we can. I mean, obviously, there are times where, you know I mean, I'll catch myself being like, okay, well, no, I need to, kind of, you know maybe I'm
Get off
giving
my
this,
soapbox.
yeah, yeah, or I'm giving this side, short shrift, or I need, like another source in the story to kind of balance things out. So I mean, that happens, but like,
Mhm.
that's why we have, multiple layers of review. That's why we have people on staff who, can ask these questions, like, hold on a second, like, you're coming across as being an advocate for this, or you're coming across as being an advocate for that. And it doesn't happen very often, but yeah, there are times where, just sometimes, just we're human, we get tunnel vision on certain things, and we're very, sometimes we see things a certain way that we think is fair, we think is balanced, but maybe other people wouldn't. So it's
Right.
good to have multiple people kind of looking at things, not just having one person just write it and, just publish it.
Actually, that's a
That
great
helps.
point, because that brings it back to teamwork, right?
Yeah.
Just like at a law firm that transcends anywhere, you need a team in order to, and that collaborative, spirit to really produce something that's of value to everyone, right? So the purpose of, for me anyway, the purpose of anything, any newsworthy or journalism in a nutshell, is really so that anybody can pick it up or view it, listen to it, however they're digesting it, and really understand what they're actually reading, listening to, right? To the point where you don't need to be a legal scholar. You don't need to know about the industry. And I feel like you guys do that a lot, and no, we're not being sponsored. This is just me being a fan.
your check
Like
your check
I feel like I
your
have to
checks in
say
the
that
mail.
at this point. Disclaimer.
Your checks in the mail, don't worry.
Yeah, exactly, right? But it's just everybody was like, when I first started my business, and this is one thing that I want the audience and everybody to know is, when I started my business, everybody's like, start local, go to your local associations and do this. And I was like, well, I don't want to think that small, because first of all, I live in the state of Florida, where it's very one-sided over here. There is nothing on the other side. Like, that is a desert, right? There's really nothing on the other side, whichever way you're looking at it. I'm not getting political here, but it's very one-sided in the state of Florida. And so, second of all, I want to look at the broad spectrum. I want to look at what the nation's narrative is, right? So that I can make a proper decision as to where I want the business to go, how I can educate my paralegals nationwide, because we're all having the same struggles. We're all going through the same thing, regardless of where we're at on the states. So understanding that, and I think ABA in general was actually one of my first memberships, and I
Huh.
went and I became a member right away, because you guys do such a great job. I started following you through social media, and I started getting the newsletters and the magazine and all that stuff, and then I started getting into the podcasts and all that stuff, and it's been great, because it's really where it's a when I always say, when you do research or when you're producing content or of anything, right? Even if you're sharing something, just make sure the resource is of value, right?
Right.
It's actually, a strong resource, because there's plenty of information out there. Whether or not it's accurate, it's up to you. But whether or not it's unbiased, right? I'm not saying right or wrong. I'm just saying, just take the bias out and just give us the information so that you yourself can provide the rest of it. But yeah, so I'm gonna get off my soapbox on that. But that's one thing that attracted to me, ABA as a nutshell and the Legal Talk Network and Paralegal Voice and everything,
Yeah,
was that, that information. So I thank you for being on the show. I thank you for your time. I appreciate I know you're so busy. So thank you so much for being on here.
of course.
And hopefully this is our last conversation. We'll definitely keep in touch. But any last words or tips for our audience that are maybe looking into being in the journalism, maybe they want to transition or something?
Yeah, I mean, I would just like suggest that because like one thing that we've noticed that there are a lot of lawyers out there who are either looking at going into journalism, or they want to write more, or they want to um they want to just get published, or which is understandable. It helps with the marketing, but also maybe it's a condition, maybe they're considering a career change or whatnot. So I
Mhm.
mean, one thing that I would suggest was that I would suggest uh just kind of figuring out sort of like what your style is, and making sure that that jives with the publication that you're aiming for, either to freelance or to maybe even write regularly for. If you have a more formalistic style, if you have a more like law review type of style, or journal, or like a formal legal journal style, that might not be a match for like some of the more mainstream publications like us, or ALM or Bloomberg or those places, or especially not for a place like Above the Law, which is more
Mhm.
conversationally and whatnot. So just kind of look to see like what your style is, what works for you. Some people are very good at like sort of the formal white paper type of writing, or the law journal case note comment kind of style. And some people don't like that, and they like they like to write more like kind of like what you would read for us, or for
Mhm.
one of those organizations. So just figure out what works for you, practice, and just you know once you kind of decide which way you want to go, then just start getting out there. I mean, we're always looking for third party content to run. We have our Your Voice columns are take a more general look at the legal industry. Um, we have Mind Your Business columns, which is more business oriented, like focused on sort of my area, business of law, technology, and
Mhm.
stuff like that.
Love that
Um,
one.
oh, thanks, thank you. But like a lot of organizations, they take like especially nowadays with unfortunately, one symptom of the journalism industry is that you have a lot of downsizing, a lot more reliance on freelancers, more reliance on third party content. But that's an opportunity for people who want to get their writing out there. Like, people are looking for content, they're looking for things to publish. They're looking for, especially for people, and if you can write, then you have a huge advantage over other people. So just get out there, send your queries out, send your pitches out. And people will respond.
Yeah, because they're always looking, right? Yeah, we
Yeah,
always say that. Everybody's like, "How do you get guests on your?" And I was like, "Well, I'm always looking. I know
yeah,
I am. I'm always looking for guests."
yeah.
But yeah, thank you. Those are amazing. I actually wrote them down so we can put them on the description as well for the audience that are probably driving in the car at this point. But thank you so much, Victor. Again, thank you for being on the podcast. And until justice is served, everyone. Bye.